That's a beautiful mug you have.
Thank you. But when the person you're with is putting you to sleep, you need all the coffee you can get.
Oh, tell me a joke.
Okay, you want a joke. Guy's riding on a bus, and the woman is looking or staring at him the whole time. She walks across finally, and she says, it's an older woman. She says, excuse me, I don't mean to offend you or anything. I couldn't help but noticing, is that a toupee you're wearing? He says, no, it's not a toupee. This is my real hair. She says, oh, okay. Goes back to her seat, sits down, keeps staring at this guy. Gets up again, walks over there and says, are you absolutely sure that's not a toupee? He says, lady, it is not a toupee. Oh, okay. One more time. She looks at her and says, I'm sorry, I have to ask. Is that a toupee you're wearing? The guy says, okay, that's a toupee. It's a rug. She says, you can't tell.
That's a funny ethnic jokes.
Yes, well,
And, I got.
Are we in the right place for that?
We're home. I got one. These two women have been friends forever. They went to high school together. One's a Catholic, one's a Jew. They're dear friends, and once a month they get together and they have lunch together. And one day they're sitting there having lunch, talking about their families, and the Jewish lady turns to the Catholic lady and says, I've been wanting to ask you something for years. I've got to ask, how could you people believe that Jesus could have walked on water, or that he could have put his finger in a glass of water and it turned to wine? How could you believe that? And the Catholic woman says, well, maybe when he walked on water, there were little pebbles underneath the surface, and he was actually walking on those. Or maybe when he touched a glass of water, there was a little drop of wine in the water and it colored the water. And anyway, how can you say anything? Do you Jewish people believe that Moses could have parted the Red Sea? And the Jewish woman looks at her and says, wasn't that something?
So, now what?
We have a great show tonight, a great guest. Stay tuned.
Well, now we're in the guest part of the show, the good part of the show, with funny people and nice people and all that. And we also have Carl Gottlieb with us, too, a man of great talent, and we are also very good lunch partners and lunch friends. Carl's wondering what his claim to fame to get to this phenomenal program is. That Carl, well, first I'm going to start with a little backstory on Carl. He is the son of Elizabeth, a medical administrative assistant, and Sergius M. Gottlieb, an engineer, which would explain where you got your sense of humor from, Carl.
Yes, clearly an engineer and a medical assistant. You know, it's funny stuff.
Yeah, so you studied drama at Syracuse University and more. When are you going to get funny, Carl? I mean, you're the funniest guy I know, so it's...
Well, it was, you know, going to college was funny because I worked at the City College Humor magazine in New York before I transferred to Syracuse. And then at Syracuse, I had a column in the Syracuse Daily Orange, which was like a bigger newspaper than the Syracuse, Annenberg paper, because it was published every day by journalism students, and we could say whatever we wanted. I wrote a piece about the marching band and the cheerleader who had a full scholarship for twirling a baton. And I commented on it. I said, you know, there's a lot of deserving people, and this is, you know, a woman who throws a baton in the air and catches it sometimes.
If she catches it,
if
yes,
she catches it. And then, so the band hung me in effigy and came to beat me up.
Oh.
And I escaped through the good efforts of friends. So after that, I said, you know, well, anything that will get people to come after you and burn you in effigy, you know, there's a profession to pursue.
Yeah. Do you have a history, like, were you a class clown? Were you, when you were in grammar school?
No, in grammar school I was chased and beaten up a lot, and in high school
I thought that was when you were an adult.
Yeah. Well, that's C-H-A-S-T-E, chase. This is S-E-D, chase, yes. Right? Okay.
Yeah. No, I was a scrawny nerd, you know, 4 eyes in grammar school. Then in high school, I grew up. I got and I became big, and never lost a fight again. And then, but I wasn't particularly funny. I edited the yearbook. That was the literary composition. Then I went to Syracuse. Then I went to City College in New York, and I did the humor magazine there. And then I went to Syracuse and was a journalism major in addition to theater. So I was always writing funny, but performing was, that came later. I found that avocation in summer stock and in the U.S. Army.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a good combination, summer stock and the U.S. Army. So, okay. And, of course, among your famous things is that you are the co-writer of Jaws, a movie that did fairly well.
A piece of work I've come to regard as the fish movie. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And and also, looking at your credits, you were on practically all the same shows that I was on, and we were never on a show together.
Yeah, that's true.
You did let me see, down here, the Bob Newhart show, All in the Family, The Odd Couple. I was on staff on every, except for Newhart. I just wrote a script, but
yeah, same. Newhart. I wrote a script for All in the Family. I sold a story. Some of the Odd Couple, I was a story editor. I was staff on Odd Couple. I left that job to do the fish movie.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that was, but Odd Couple was a lot of fun. I loved working with Tony and Gary and everything. Jerry Belson was probably still on the show when you were there. Yeah. He was a genius. I never worked with him, but he was quite a guy. So you went from there, and then so now it also said the Jaws thing came about. You and Steve Spielberg were friends, or how did that happen?
Steven was a new kid in town. He was under contract at Universal directing like Night Gallery and Columbo and shows
he did that fabulous movie about a truck driver.
Yes, he did. He did Duel, which was a 90-minute movie of the week on ABC, but it was released theatrically in Europe, and the French, with their love of directors and auteurs, immediately seized on him as a new director, and it took two American movies to cement that position, because when Duel was like dismissed as a TV movie, but then he did Sugarland Express, which was very well reviewed but didn't do well at the box office. And we were friends during all this time. I acted in a couple of his TV movies. He did television films, and then he said, "I'm going to do this movie about this book about this fish, and it'd be great if you were acting in it."
It was called Herring.
Yeah, Herring. That was the working title. Yeah. And then from that, I got a job. I made suggestions as to what I thought of the script, and he showed those to the producers, and they said, "Okay, we'll put you on for a few weeks to do a dialogue polish," and that was 3 weeks before production started. So I started rewriting with Steven. We shared a house. He had lived in a rented house in Martha's Vineyard for 4 months during the shoot. So I lived there while I was still on the show, because I was there as an actor, and then I was rewriting every night. But when I got finished with all the words, there was still 2 months of fish to shoot. Oh. So I got to go home. Steven and the others had to stay on the island and keep shooting the damn shark every day. Yeah,
and were you involved at the time when they kept talking about that the fish wasn't working and the shark was a failure?
That's why I had to do a lot of fancy footwork, because we didn't, I couldn't write for the shark, and the shark was the lead title role. So we shot up all our cover. We had cover scenes that in case of bad weather or something, if the fish wasn't working, we shot up all the cover scenes. We had nothing left to shoot except the fish, and that's when I went home.
Shark had all the good lines, I remember.
Yeah. If I was a Jeopardy category, it would be his hits begin with a J. So it was Jaws and The Jerk, which was
your hits,
yes,
not
my
Steve's.
hits.
Yeah.
So Steve Martin and I are collaborating. We've agreed to collaborate on a script. Paramount is paying us money. were sitting every day in a writer's room in the writer's building at Paramount, old-fashioned studio complex, and nothing.
Did you become friends when you were working on the Smothers Brothers show together?
Sure,
so that's, Rob Reiner was on that. It's an amazing cast. Bob Einstein.
Yeah, let's stay with the jerk.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get back to the jerk.
There we are looking at each other in that way that you do in a comedy room when there's no comedy. And Steve, winces a little because every comic faces this when they're doing a show. He says, well, there's a line in my act that always works. And because the comics hate to do that, because when they do that, they can't do the line again, in the act. It doesn't seem fresh or original because everybody's seen it. In any case, so Steve says, line in my act that always works is, I was born a poor black child. Big laugh. Even if the rest of the show is not going well, that's a saver. That line always
voiceover.
That's a great story.
But it's a voiceover, though.
Yeah.
So
we looked at each other as he said that. I said, and we basically said, well, what if you were born a poor black child, you extremely white person with white hair? What would that have been like? And we started writing the first scene of The Jerk, which is the black family in Mississippi Delta blues regions, with this one white child who's, a young man coming of age. And it turns out to be a coming of age comedy about this young white guy in a black family who just, and the comedy was that he hears on late night radio, he hears like a Lester Lannon orchestra. And he has previously said to his family, they say, come on, Navin, do you want to sing some blues with us? And he says, nah, blues always makes me sad. And he hears this Lester Lannon orchestra on the radio, and it's like the music of his people. He goes, oh, wait, and he dances a little bit in his awkward way to that music, and he identifies and then goes off on his quest, and the rest of the movie is episodic pastiche.
Well, first I must
joke
acknowledge,
after joke
I'm
after
a
joke.
huge Steve Martin fan.
Well,
I think he's unbelievable. And so he could also, Lester Lannon, he could also played Guy Lombardo that time too. But the everything, and when at that time, when the movie had just come out, back home, my son, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years old at best, whatever it is, and we happened to have bought a dog. And my son said, can we name him Shithead? Okay, and that was very risque, as we say in the business, and that's calling a dog shithead or using the word shit in a movie. So how did it?
Well, the script, just grew. Paramount didn't see the value of a Steve Martin relationship, so they put it in turnaround.
David Picker, of a studio. So.
Yeah, David Picker took it to Universal and did a negative pickup deal. They made it for $3 million or something like that, and it went on to become, a huge hit for Steve. And we had, in connection with that, we'd shot a short film called The Absent-Minded Waiter that starred Steve Martin and Terry Garr and Buck Henry, and Paramount had financed that because David Picker, who was like third-generation film business.
David V. Picker. He always has his initial in the credits.
His grandfather had a Nickelodeon in Boston at the turn of the last century in 1905. So he knows the business. And he had a great idea, take a short subject, funny short subject with Steve, make it, and give it to the exhibitors for free. Attach it to some big Paramount picture. I think it was going to go out with Grease as an added attraction. And theater audiences would see Steve Martin in a movie theater and go, oh, he's a movie star.
Okay, I'd like to ask Carl a question. Carl, putting The Jerk aside, what's your favorite comedy movie of all time?
From the studio era, I loved Sullivan's Travels, Preston Sturges film with Joel McRae. And before that, there is, to me, no equivalent to Buster Keaton in The General and The Navigator and Our Relations. I mean, the Buster Keaton, The General, is the most hysterical film you can see. I mean, it's just...
And he was in the glorious Swanson Cecil B. DeMille line movie.
Yeah.
He actually did it in a Mad World, which I'm not a huge fan of, but he makes a move when some cars go by, he does like a quadruple take.
Yes.
That I have no idea how he even was able to physically do that.
He was the most amazing physical specimen. I mean, they X-rayed him for a studio physical once, and the doctor said, "When did you break your neck?" He said, "I don't remember breaking my neck." He said, "But you obviously took a fall at one time, landed on your head, broke your neck." And he continued. He was known as Buster when he was in vaudeville.
That's why he's Buster. He busted everything.
It was the Three Keatons featuring Buster, the human mop.
Oh my God!
They used to throw him around. His father actually. So there were some hecklers in the audience when they were playing Yale. They were playing New Haven, Connecticut, in a vaudeville theater, and some Yaleys in the front row were interfering with the act and mocking them. And his father picked up Buster, who used to come out on stage in a little Irish comedy outfit. He picked up Buster and threw him at the heckler, and broke the heckler's jaw bones. And Buster was of course,
Well, I know you said most of them were back in the early 30s and 40s, but how about more recently? Let's say.
Well, I did enjoy Tootsie a great deal. I thought Tootsie was a wonderful comedy. Beautifully paced, well performed, great performances from Terry Garr and Dustin Hoffman. So that was fun. Great ad-lib speech from Terry about her rights as a woman. And then going on in more modern films, it's hard to beat the Brits. I mean, with Monty Python's both the Holy Grail and the original, and now for something completely different, which is Life of Brian. The Pythons were perfect, and they were collectively perfect. And then when they did A Fish Called Wanda, John Cleese was a solo turn, and again brilliant.
One of the funniest movies ever made.
Yeah.
On a set, and I know you spent a lot of time on
Yes.
sets. You did a number of movies.
I've been producer. I've been a showrunner.
As an actor, a director, producer.
All those things.
What was that you can think of offhand the most hilarious, or the funniest thing that ever happened, not in the script?
Behind the scenes or whatever that came out of something ad-libbed or improvised.
There's a short-lived series that I produced and directed with Steve at Universal called George Burns Comedy Week, and George Burns was the host. It was an anthology series. Every week we did a different half-hour comedy directed by a different comedy director. John Landis did one, John Corty, Phil Alden Robinson, a lot of good directors. Steve directed one. And we were doing a show called Home for Dinner, and it's Eugene Levy plays a suburban husband, family guy who's just moved to a new little perfect suburban community, and his neighbors include Fred Willard and a guy from Mission Impossible and a couple other people, and they invite him on a weekend fishing trip. So when he's in the car going what he thinks is fishing, they reveal to him that they're flying to Central America to capture a warlord for the CIA, and that's what they do on their off time. They're mercenaries. And Fred Willard's got a red beret and submachine gun.
With Fred Willard, you don't even need a script half the time. So it's
and there's a scene where they storm El Chapo's headquarters, where this drug lord is hiding out. And as they're charging, they get spotted, and guards open up on them with machine guns, and they're throwing grenades, fighting their way into this compound. And they're down on the grass, and Fred Willard is looking at the grass and says, "You think this is Miracle Grow or
no.
I mean, what are they? This is really good grass. How do they get? His friend is pinned down by enemy fire. Says, "You think this is Miracle Grow or something else?" He says, "Miracle Grow."
Now, was that in the script? Because it's funny you talk about in the in-laws when it's we talk about
Serpentine.
Serpentine.
No, I don't know if it was in the script.
He's also doing the hand thing.
It was Fred Willard, and
But he was Senior Wences, not Fred, but the guy was, I forget who was.
And probably of like all the unexpected comedy in the world, if you like listed by perpetrator, I think Fred Willard would be
Fred is amazing.
Up at the top, along with with Steve Martin and
Fred's teaching now mostly.
Yeah, he lives about 2 blocks away from me. And Fred is always great. He never prepares anything, and he doesn't have an act, but he just goes on stage and does stuff, whether it's for a memorial service.
There was a comic who's still working, a guy named Eddie Griffin, who I joked about when he first appeared on the scene. I said, Eddie Griffin, he had an entourage before he had an act.
A spec entourage, I guess.
A bunch of guys travel. He had a posse traveling with him, and nobody knew if he was funny or not, but he had 4 guys with him, so it must be Eddie Murphy or someone like him.
All right, I guess you sign off, John.
So I guess we're going to, Carl. It's been a great pleasure.
It has. I think, as Don Rickles might have said, I wish it was as great a pleasure for me as it was for you.
And we will see you next Wednesday at lunch. So it's corned beef that you didn't win. So it's
I hope it's not the same corned
when
beef.
I left the music back, I left California. I had to go out of state for a couple of years to go to prison. No,
was it a fugitive thing?
No, I went to Florida. We did some building there, and I remember we all had our own chairs at this luncheon that John refers to. It's a great luncheon, and I remember leaving and saying to Carl, you can have my chair.
Thank you.
And I noticed you use it.
You do sit, right across. You were always right across from me, below the window where you can see the women outside, whatever. So.
Great luncheon.
He's still always invited. So that was our show.
See you next time.